Hi, my name's Cliff Freilich. I'm Executive Director of Cinema St. Louis, and we are the presenters of the 29th Annual Whitaker St. Louis International Film Festival. We're happy to be joined by Cam Cowan, who is the director of Opeka. Is it Opeka or Opeka?
Opeka.
Opeka.
Yeah.
I got it wrong twice. Opeka. It's very seldom said in the film itself, so I
Right.
had no clue.
Right. It's a Slovenian name. His parents were Slovene.
Okay, well, great. So anyway, welcome, Cam. Thanks for joining us for this Q&A. Let's start simply and just begin at the beginning. How did you become familiar with Father Pedro, and how did you decide this is somebody I must make a documentary about?
Yeah. I was filming in Madagascar for a documentary called Madagascar about the social and political strife in Madagascar. And I was filming on and off for about 3.5 years. In one of my first trips to Madagascar, when I was trying to get my bearings and find subjects and support, a woman emerged from a quarry, a rock quarry, which is actually featured in that film, Madagascar. With a basket of rocks on her head and a baby on her back. And with my translator, I asked her where people live, because I was trying to find some people to film. She said, some people live over here and some people live up there. And the quarry's on the side of a hill, and there's a long valley and then another hill. And I looked up following her finger, and there were these rows and rows of two-story white homes. If you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. And I was just stunned by it because I'd been all over Madagascar and there was nothing like it. At first, I thought it was maybe a military barracks, something having to do with the government. I had no idea. And I asked her, what's that? And she said, well, that's Akamaso. And I said, what's Akamaso? And as I like to say, she looked at me like I was from another planet. How could you not know Father Pedro? And I hadn't known about Father Pedro. So I did some research and realized that he's somebody that I wanted to talk with and potentially use as an expert in the film. And because he was very outspoken politically. He's a very outspoken person, brilliant person, forceful. So I wanted to meet him. My next trip to Madagascar, my translator and I drove to Akamaso. And in Madagascar, you just show up in places. You can try to make appointments and things, but it's perfectly fine and culturally acceptable, and encouraged just to show up. So we showed up, and he had just come back from a fundraising trip in Europe. All the money that he raises for Akamaso comes from private donations, and he was tired and a little bit grumpy, and he's big guys, big white everything, sort of like you. And he basically said, "What do you want? And why are you here? Why are you here in Madagascar?" And I explained to him why I was making that film, and at the end of it, because I had this reception often in Madagascar, almost universally, because I was an American making a film about domestic political dysfunction, but also international political reaction to events in Madagascar, including certain events by the United States that were quite disturbing to me and to the people of Madagascar. People would say, "Wow, that's really cool that you're doing that." And I would always say, one of the reasons I can do it is I live in America, but they can't. So at the end of it, he said, all right, how can I help you? And he just, anything I wanted, time, interviews, filming, anything I wanted. And he did end up being an expert in film, as I say. But once I got a better understanding of him, on paper, it was just like, wow, because there's been a lot written about him. There have been a couple of short documentaries on him in Europe. But once I got to see him and connect with him, it's just like how I got engaged with Madagascar. I just had more and more questions, like, why did you do this? Like, how could you do this, right? You're somebody who could have, I don't know, well, as you know, he could have been a professional athlete, and he chose not to do that and commit a life of celibacy and poverty to work in one of the poorest countries in the world. So once I got that whole story and got to know him, I just thought this had to be a film. It has to be something, because the messages, right? There are layers of messages. At one layer, here's a guy who took people out of an enormous landfill and taught them to build their own homes, because he knew how to do that. His father was a mason, and he grew up knowing how to build homes. So he convinced them he could teach them how to do that. And that, for him, was the first step for them to regain their dignity, because they were living in landfill. They were fighting for food with pigs in the landfill. The children, half of the people would die there. So he was able to do that, teach them how to build their homes, build their schools, all of that. And I was just taken by what he had accomplished at that level. But at another level, it was, an example of choices made. And I thought, when I was 60 and I had the choice to be a professional athlete or celibacy and poverty, wouldn't be a hard choice, even today. But that was his choice, and I really wanted to explore that and understand that, because it was extraordinary, just extraordinary. He's a brilliant man, forceful, passionate, huge, athletic, and he could have done anything, and this is what he chose to do. And then at the highest level, it's really, I thought that we can find inspiration in those kinds of examples, like what we can do in making choices to help others, and to find justice. And I also wanted that to be recorded and to be in the film, because I think over the last little while we've been losing that sense in the world, and I think he's a shining example of how to do it the right way.
Now, Father Pedro is obviously an enormously open person, so I'm assuming he didn't have any particular resistance to the notion of having a film made about him, or did he?
Oh, he really did. He really did. Yeah, he doesn't. He's very, even in that first meeting, he said, photographers come in and journalists come in and filmmakers come in, and they want to do things, but they want to do them for themselves, right? They want to make the story for them, and for them to make money and for them to be known, and not for the children of Akamasai. Everything to him is about the children. It wasn't too difficult to convince him, but I had to do a little bit because of the work I was doing on Madagascar, that he knew that's not what I was after, that I was actually trying to bring light onto something. But even after I got to know him, before I asked him if we could do the documentary and sign a life rights agreement, he was resistant because, my effort was going to be to bring him to North America. He's relatively well known in Europe. He is not known in North America. And thank you to the St. Louis International Film Festival for for helping out on that. It's huge. So he's not well known in North America. I wanted to do that, but he doesn't want to make himself out. He's a humble guy. He's big, he's open, he's passionate, but he doesn't, other than helping the children, he's not eager for acclaim. He's not like, he's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize several times, but you can't talk to him about it. He just doesn't want to hear that, right? He's just fine not being nominated. He's fine not getting it, except it would obviously be money for Akamuso, but he doesn't want to hear about it. So at one point, but I got him through it by saying, this is what we're going to do. We also, I wanted to, and he knew, create a charitable organization in the US, which is madakids.org, it's 501c3, so that in connection with the film and other things, he has a book that he has written in French. My wife has translated it into English, and it'll be published. And in connection with that, try to raise money for Akamuso. So 100% of the donations to madakids.org, 501c3, tax deductible, go to Akamuso, 100%. There's no overhead costs that come out of contributions or anything. So if people see the film and say, wow, this is really something, how can I help? There's an easy way, $10 contribution, $50 contribution. That's a great thing. So sort of a connection of, you should be better known. He needs to raise money privately. There's the EU for sure, but a big market in North America. He should be better known in North America. And we were going to create this charitable organization. I think he felt that it was worth giving up his sense of humility, I guess, and even this, right? So this is his image that we made. It's on the post,
which is a really terrific graphic image, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we've got merch. We have merch, and we love merch. I brought it over, right? I went to Madagascar last September to show him a fine cut of the film, and I brought this over as gifts, and he just, he doesn't want to become an idol, right? It's that kind of thing, and so yeah, it wasn't entirely easy to get him agree to do it, but once he's in, he was pretty much all in.
Give us a little sense. You do it in the film, obviously, but because we don't have great familiarity, obviously, as American viewers with Madagascar, can you talk a little bit about the geography? We start in the landfill. He persuades people to leave the landfill, many of them to build their own homes under his watch, with his help. And there are several places that have now developed subsequent to that initial movement. So how many of them are there, and where are they in relevance to both the original landfill where it began, the quarry where they obviously make money in order to help sustain?
Yep. So it took him a while. He was in Madagascar for 13 years before his health started to fail him. He almost died from diseases. And they transferred him, the Vincentians transferred him up to the capital of Madagascar, Antananarivo, which is so he was down in the sort of southeast. They transferred him to the mid-north hill country. Madagascar is the fourth largest island in the world. It's the size of France. It's huge, and has a population now of about 30 million people. So it's a big country. One of his first weekends there, he stumbled, and we go through this in the film, as you say. He stumbled upon this huge landfill, and was stunned and disturbed by what he saw. So he actually worked with people for quite a long period of time to convince them that he was there to try to help them. And not as a missionary. He never was a missionary. He was never looking to convert people to Catholicism. He's really a humanitarian first and foremost, and a seeker of justice. And he was there to try to help people. He doesn't care if anyone becomes a Catholic or even believes in a God. So he was able to convince them that he could teach them to build their homes. He got 70 families to agree, and he went out to look for land. When he would tell people what he was trying to do, he would get turned down. Oh, we're not going to take those people. They're the lowest of the lowest people. They were the most marginalized people. Even with extensive poverty in Madagascar, it was just like, no, these are the untouchables, right? We're not going to allow them in our neighborhood. So he didn't disclose in a last attempt to find space. He didn't disclose exactly why he was doing what he was doing, and he did get some land, but it's quite far out. The first village, and it's a lovely village. I've been there several times. And because it's far out, not near a city, it's in the country, it started with farming. And that's what it does today. So they raise crops, they eat their food, they sell their food, that kind of thing. And it's really beautiful, nestled in some hills, just really lovely. But there were still people in the landfill who didn't want to leave the area, and in fact needed to work in the landfill, and so they said they wouldn't do it. So he built a second village that's close to the landfill. Wasn't right on top of it, but pretty close, and that's where his home is. That's where the offices are. Then after that, just year after year after year, they would build out the homes in these villages, but then he would build other villages. Because once sort of word got out, it wasn't just people from the landfill, it was the poorest people who really needed help, who were coming in by the droves. So they just kept building villages. They have 19 now. They've completed a 19th. Our film says they're 18. Each village has schools and work opportunities and transportation infrastructure. Gardens. It's really quite something. And he's also been able to build schools around the country. So believing in education as just critical, he's focused a lot of his resources on that. In addition, health. In addition, he's built through Akamaso hospitals and clinics, medical clinics in different parts of the country as well.
Great, that helps a little bit. And how many total villages now? You say 18 or 19? 19. Yeah. That helps a little bit as far as just getting a clearer sense of exactly, and how spread out are they? I mean, is it all clustered still in a single region within?
Most of them are clustered in the region in a series of hills, that you see in the film. There's the first one that's very, very far out. There are a couple of more that are a little bit further south, southwest. Still, an hour and a half car ride.
Okay, I'm curious, and I suspect I know the answer to this, but let's ask it anyway. Clearly, what he's engaged in should be the responsibility of the government.
Yeah,
that's referenced any number of times in the
yeah,
film. And clearly, your previous film, no doubt, dealt with this extensively.
yeah,
The government in Madagascar is obviously highly dysfunctional and I suspect corrupt. And therefore, the resources are not used in the way in which they should be.
right.
Has anyone ever encouraged, and I guess this might be in opposition to what he can do as a priest, but to become more involved on a
Yeah,
governmental level as
yeah,
a politician?
yeah. Really important question that I haven't had asked before. He is very political, um, very outspoken, because he knows the responsibility of the politicians, the shirked responsibility of the politicians, and that's why we had that. We start a film with a cold open, but then we have this title open too, and I wanted to just put that right in there because that is, you know, that is so much of his mission, right? Is to shine light where other people can't or won't, on the dysfunction of the government and the corruption of the politicians, and the responsibility of the governments. Uh, and he is doing what they should be doing, right? And they can't. And so there's even, I've had this concern. I've talked to people at the UN there. They have this concern. He's at a little bit of risk from these guys because he makes them look really bad. In fact, they come to him. We've got these people. Can you house these people? Kind of thing. And you saw the education system that they have at Akumaso is better than the country's education system, and the healthcare is better, and the housing is better, and he's providing jobs and all of that. And he's demonstrated, right, that extreme poverty can be eliminated with resources properly channeled, and that's something the government cannot do. It can do it. It will not do it. And so he's always critical of that. People have asked him to get more involved. He obviously he's Argentine and Slovenian. He can't be president, although there have been movements, right, to try to get him to run for political office, and he won't do that. But I think he feels that he can best influence events by not being inside and being boxed in and compromised. And ultimately, a guy like that, right, he would if he were in the government in some capacity, he would resign, probably within a week. So he stays vocal. He stays very connected. I mean, he encourages the presidents. He encourages the mayors of Antananarivo to come. The current president, Andry Razuela, was a former mayor of Antananarivo and had gone up to Akumaso. Most of them will not, but he did. He also went up there after his election, before he was inaugurated. Will Andry be? He said he's going to try to fight corruption, and Pedro has been sort of pushing him on that and being outspoken about it. Will he be able to? I don't know. At what level? I don't know. It's a pretty sad state, and there's no. The underlying problem is there's no functional democracy, right? There's no foundational functional democracy, and that's going to be a problem until something big happens with the elite, the intellectual and business and political elite in the country, changing. just scrub it. It needs a fundamental change. No one person, even if elected president, would be able to change it.
I'm also curious about Father Pedro's relationship with the church.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's outspoken there as well. As you point out, he's
Yeah.
not doing missionary work in the traditional sense in that he's not attempting to convert people. They may choose to obviously embrace Catholicism because of his example, but not because he's actually doing any proselytizing.
Okay.
And many of the opinions that he expresses in that one segment of an interview are quite contrary to the stated positions of the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
We do see him toward the end of the film riding around with Pope Francis, who they presumably might have known one another in a different context before all this. But anyway, talk a little bit about his status within the church hierarchy, how he's viewed. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, great. Yeah, just terrific. Yeah, the Pope Francis visited. Pope Francis is from Argentina, and Pedro's from Argentina, and they were actually at the same seminary for a little while, but not in the same class. I think Pope Francis is about 10 years older than Pedro. But obviously, Pope Francis was a bishop in Buenos Aires. And they've met a couple of times and shared, and Pope Francis is, of course, a more progressive pope within the church, and that is appealing. So I didn't want to make a big deal of it. We were there. We were there the week after the Pope was there. We had lots of footage, but I just wanted to put it in the end credits to note it, that happened. He is considered, within the Vincentians, he's well known and very important. I don't think so within the Catholic Church so much. I might be wrong on that. I never really, I'm not a religious person myself, so I never really, and I didn't see him that way, and I really didn't dive into that very much, except, as you note, we were doing the filming and getting our B-roll and doing the interviews once I knew that I wanted him to be the narrator of the story, of his story. And, it just occurred to me that there's questions I didn't ask because I had assumed with his mind and perspective in the world that he wouldn't be adhering to some of the more controversial church dogma. And so I didn't give him any warning. I just started asking the questions about pedophilia and women in the church and celibacy and all of that. And he didn't disappoint. He came, he didn't disappoint. In fact, one of his only comments after he did see the fine cut of the film was, "I think I'm going to get in trouble with the church," which, probably made him a little happy. But, he is a priest and they allow him to do this, right? It's not connected with the church. Akumaso is an independent NGO, but they do allow him to do it. And he's mindful of that as well. But on the other hand, he's just, what he feels is what he says. And he tries not to dissemble or qualify. He's very passionate about his views, and his views are well considered, right? He's had a lot of experience. He's a true philosopher, and I know he believes in God. I don't know what context that his God takes. I wasn't really concerned about it and didn't really care. But as to church dogma, he was pretty clear. Yeah.
Now, we'll conclude with this, and you address it in the film, and he's hopeful about this, but I'm curious as to whether you are. And that is, he's obviously aging.
Yeah.
He's had health issues in the past. How old, by the way, is he right now?
70 now, 71.
Okay. Uh, so obviously, at a certain point, he's no longer going to be able to head this particular nonprofit and do the kind of work that he's been doing over these many decades. And he has hope that obviously the young people that he's taught, who are now in positions of responsibility and have educations, will take up the mantle and carry forward. What do you think?
Yeah, big question. One of the biggest questions I had, what, because so you see him and he's a charismatic, a non-religious charismatic kind of guy, right? He's big, he's powerful, he's articulate, he's bold. He walks in a room and there it is. And to start the organization, and to keep it together as it was developing, that was really critical. And this can be scaled and it can be replicated, but it takes that kind of leadership, which may not be in one person, could be in a group of people, but it just takes that kind of leadership if you're talking about convincing people in a landfill, extremely poor people, the most marginalized people, to build their own city, right? And he had all the components to be able to do that, including knowing how to build. Now that it's 30 years on and very well known there, I do think, and he has a group of officers, mostly women, who most of whom grew up there, right, and have been highly educated and decided they wanted to help out. But in addition, in those villages, those are actually democratic villages. They have the men and women elect a village leader, and they have their own meetings, and they have a whole group meeting where things get decided, all village meeting where things get decided about Akamaso. But the villages themselves are democratic, and that's allowed leaders to come up through that, and important leaders, and not just elders. You saw that one scene where there was a group of elders around, so he believes, and I think there is reason to certainly hope, but reason to believe that it is the case that there are, and I've met many of them, and they're wonderful, exceptional people, that there are enough people to continue on collectively. No one person is going to step into his shoes. And he has said the person who succeeds him will probably not be a priest, will probably not be a religious person, right? So we'll see. I think he's got some time. He does take care of his health. He's pretty robust even to this day. But it'll be. I'll be eager to see how it all goes. I won't be eager to see him go, but I will be eager to see how the transition takes place.
All right, Cam. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to have this
Thank you.
conversation. Good luck as you move Opeka out into the world, and I hope that you're successful in actually getting more attention paid to the great work that Father Pedro is doing, and actually get some money flowing in his direction from the U.S.
Thank you, Cliff. Very much appreciated.